Traditional explanations of trauma tell us that it is characterized by a physical or emotional response that occurs after the experience of a catastrophic or dangerous event. But what if this traumatic event happened years ago, or even hundreds of years ago? How do we understand present day physical and emotional trauma responses that hold their origins in historically traumatic events? Historical trauma theory provides a framework to begin to answer these questions. Even more, this perspective is essential to furthering our understanding of factors that impact health and well being in racially and culturally marginalized populations. Early conceptualizations of historical trauma were first introduced by clinicians who are alarmed at the increased rates of persistent trauma symptoms found among Holocaust survivors and their families. Since this time, scholars have extended these early understandings to the study of various cultural groups around the world. For example, Braveheart and De Buren explored historical trauma among Lakota tribe members. Donna Nagata's work focused on the application of historical trauma to the study of Japanese American internment camp survivors. Lastly, Ortega Williams, Crutchfield, and Hall extended understandings of historical trauma to consider the unique function of colorism. Despite these previous studies, shortcomings within the academic literature continue to limit not only the empirical capabilities of this work, but our ability to apply it to social work practice. Without a clear framework by which to understand historical trauma theory, social workers are really missing out on a valuable perspective by which to inform research and practice. In order to begin this discussion, it's important to first clarify exactly what the term historical trauma means. Early researchers use this term interchangeably with terms like intergenerational, multi-generational, or collective trauma. Perhaps the simplest and most concerning limitation of historical trauma research is this interchangeable use of terms. So to clarify, intergenerational trauma refers to the specific experience of trauma across family generations, but does not necessarily imply a shared or group experience. Multi-generational trauma describes a process by which multiple generations are simultaneously exposed to a traumatic event. Therefore, multiple generations experience symptoms as a result of direct exposure. Lastly, collective trauma simply refers to trauma that is experienced by a group of people. A collective trauma may or may not have a generational or historical aspect, but can develop one over time. Historical trauma is distinct from intergenerational, multi-generational, and collective trauma. It is unique in that it is experienced across generations as well as shared by a group of people. More than that, historical trauma theory can be understood to have three major constructs: a mass trauma experience, an intergenerational cycle of trauma transmission, and an elicited trauma response. Now that we have an understanding of what historical trauma is, it is even more important to understand what causes it. When characterizing such events, Sotero offers the language of mass trauma experience. She notes that we can assume four things about these types of events. First, mass trauma experiences are deliberately and systematically inflicted on a target population by a dominant population. These types of trauma events are not limited to a single event, but continue over time. As I previously mentioned, these mass trauma events are collectively experienced, and the impact of these mass traumas derail a population from its natural projected historical course, often resulting in a legacy of physical, psychological, social, and economic disparities. It's also important to note that contemporary researchers of historical trauma have predominantly studied mass trauma experiences as they exist within the United States. These mass trauma experiences originate in the legacy of slavery, colonialism, and white supremacy. Moreover, these types of events are contextualized through an ecological lens. Researchers note that mass trauma experience can impact multiple domains of health and well-being. Previously noted domains include segregation, displacement, or environmental trauma that's demonstrated through legalized captivity to plantations, reservations, or refugee camps, or as physical and emotional trauma that might manifest as racial health disparities and ongoing experiences of race-related stress. Researchers have also noted the impact of psychosocial trauma, exemplified through the loss of cultural traditions or native language, as well as political and legal trauma that persists through legalized exclusion from voting or political participation, as well as disparate incidents of arrest and incarceration. The ecological lens employed to characterize mass trauma experiences really highlights the multidimensional nature of historical trauma theory. I believe that a multidimensional conceptualization of historical trauma theory demands a multidisciplinary response. As researchers and clinicians seek to expand this body of work, it is vital that we consider conceptual and empirical complements to historical trauma theory that are related but not intentionally grounded in this framework. For example, many economists unknowingly track the effects of economic trauma across generations through the study of income or wealth inequality, as well as race-based reparations. Additionally, research in theology has illuminated how mass trauma experiences, such as slavery and colonization, rupture direct connections to history, culture, and religious community. A comprehensive understanding of historical trauma theory might consider the impact of economic trauma, as well as religious or spiritual trauma. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is historical trauma theory relevant to social work research and practice? One could argue that theoretical frameworks like historical trauma theory reflect foundational principles that have guided the social work profession, such as person and environment or ecological systems theory. However, I believe that historical trauma theory not only challenges, but provides us an opportunity to expand our understanding of what it truly means to view the person and environment. Researchers like Sotero have noted that historical trauma is a social determinant of health, and in this sense, provides context for the existence of racial disparities that continue to plague present-day society. Historically, social workers have tasked themselves with addressing these social issues, often relying on person and environment theory to explain how systemic-level factors impact individual-level health and well-being. But what does it mean if our current understanding of person and environment does not take into account the persistent and expansive impact of multiple systems of oppression? Historical trauma theory provides us a lens to grapple with the complex legacy of slavery, colonialism, and white supremacy within our present-day society. As we seek to integrate an anti-oppressive and anti-racist lens into the social work profession, we must acknowledge the ways we've fallen short of this charge. In order to truly begin to understand the experiences of populations who have been impacted by historical trauma, our understanding of person and environment must do more to consider the socio-political context in which individuals live. This means our understanding of person and environment must consider the ecological impact of historic systems of oppression. Historical trauma theory provides a guiding star to pursue this work, and is why I believe historical trauma theory is indispensable to the future of social work research and practice.